30 Odd Minutes is sponsored in part by Digital Dowsing. Who are you powered by?
For the next 30 minutes, we will explore the unexplained. From mysteries beyond our galaxy to ghostly phenomena in our own backyard. We will dive into our psychic abilities and explore everything from conspiracies to the just plain weird. Welcome to 30 Odd Minutes. If the truth is out there, we will find it. But only by sheer accident.
Yeah.
All right.
Welcome to 30 Odd Minutes. We've got to work on our landings. As you can see, we've brought the mothership down right here in Rome, the Vatican. They can't even see us. We're cloaked, don't worry. But tonight we're going to talk about the paranormal and the Vatican. Think about it. There are roughly 1.2 billion Catholics in the world, and the Vatican is pretty much the central government for all of them. It's going to be a very interesting show. Want to say hello to our good friends, Matt and Andrew in the Control Center. How are you guys?
All right,
Hey,
Jeff.
Jeff. How's it going?
Going good. How are you?
Not too bad.
Excellent.
Hey, we got an interesting little piece right here. I'd like to say greetings to everyone in the UK and Ireland who's watching us on Channel 200, Controversial TV. On Sky TV platform, that's 2 million more homes that now receive the mothership's powerful signal. Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Welcome. All right.
Hope everything's fine on the other side of the pond.
Right on. UK and Ireland, welcome, guys. Great to have you guys with us. We're always trying to reach out and get new viewers all the time. It's a constant struggle, a constant battle, and that's why we assigned Dr. Dreck the task. Take a look.
Greetings, oddballs. Dr. Dreck here. Jeff has asked me to see if I can find a way to get a larger viewer audience for 30 odd minutes, and he promised that he'd unlock the door and let me out of here. So I got a great idea. Why just stop at Earth? I'm going to transmit the show to another planet. We're going to gain a whole new planet in viewership. So I've picked a planet just out of random, way out there, and I'm going to transmit our signal right now.
For the next 30 minutes, we will explore the unexplained. From mysteries beyond our galaxy to ghostly phenomena in our own backyard. We will dive into our psychic abilities.
Oh, that's gratitude for you. You damn dirty apes!
Thank you, Dr. Dreck. Hey! All right. That's 2 million more apes we can add. Thank you. Oh, man. Love that guy. Okay, in every sense of the word, the Vatican is a government. It's a government with serious influence over, like we said, 1.2 billion people, and governments have secrets. Recently, the Vatican announced guidelines on how to deal with supernatural phenomena. Back in 2009, the Pope's chief astronomer conceded that life may exist on other worlds. In the 1970s, a Catholic priest was tinkering with time travel. The Church is obviously trying to prepare its flock for some greater truth. Tonight, we'll explore all of that and more. Our guest is a lecturer. He's the author of the new book, Holy Ghosts, or How a Not-So-Good Catholic Boy Became a Believer in Things That Go Bump in the Night. You've seen him on A&E and the Sundance Channel, and he's written for newspapers like USA Today and Newsday. Please welcome live from his haunted Long Island home, Gary Jansen.
How are you?
Thanks for having me on.
Hey, so you're in a haunted home right now?
Well, previously haunted.
Previously haunted. What did you do?
Previously haunted. So no longer haunted, but was for about was for many years, and then activity kicked up between 2007 and 2008.
What kind of things did you experience in your house that made you say, "Whoa, this is haunted"?
Yeah, it was. I think if you were to isolate the events and just look at them individually, it wasn't really that big a deal. But the fact that they started stacking, so it was almost a just your almost basic haunting, which was strange sounds, sound of footsteps, weird shadows, strange electrical feelings, strange electrical anomalies. So everything. I mean, the book talks a lot about it, but things started to happen after my wife miscarried in 2007. So a couple of days after that, the house started to perk up in a weird, strange way. And over the course of a full year, just events started to stack on top of each other, on top of each other. Some things were really frightening, some things were funny, and they all kind of coalesced about a year later.
Now, you're a devout Catholic. You're a man of faith. How did that compute, so to say, when you started dealing with these things that didn't fall neatly into your understanding of the regular world and your understanding of your Catholic faith?
Sure. No, the Catholic faith is a really supernatural kind of faith.
Sure.
But I grew up in the 70s and the 80s, and there was in the 60s, there was the Vatican II Council, which kind of shifted the Vatican's focus on what it does in the world. So they really focused in the 60s, 70s, and 80s on social justice. So I grew up in an environment where my faith was really about social justice, do the right thing, help people. They never talked about aliens. They never talked really that much about supernatural or the power of prayer or even what spirituality was. So when all that stuff started happening, it kind of threw me for a bit of a loop. But then I'd been studying St. Ignatius and Ignatian spirituality before that. And his is a very supernatural, very spiritual spirituality. And so the blending of those two things, the St. Ignatian spirituality, and then those events that started to happen in the house, well, they seem to come together and they seem to make a lot more sense. But it did take me about a year, just kind of researching, because the church doesn't talk all that much about it.
Right.
And a lot of priests don't talk about it, or they don't know how to talk about it. So I found myself at a bit of a loss. But then just through research, I discovered that what a lot of people do know, which is that the Catholic Church has a very, very supernatural history.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, funny you say St. Ignatius. I was raised Catholic, and I went through confirmation, and you're supposed to take a saint's name. And back then, I took St. Ignatius. Why? Because it was the weirdest name of the bunch, and that was purely my reasoning behind Ignatius. But now, maybe there was something more subtle that turned into my career choice. This supernatural saint that no coincidences, I guess. Maybe
no coincidences. And we should actually bring up St. Ignatius later on when you want to talk about space travel, because there's a bit of that in St. Ignatius too.
I knew he was an alien. You heard it here first, folks. Thank you for the truth. Okay, now recently, June of 2012, the Vatican announced plans on how to deal with the supernatural. There's the headline: Vatican publishes guide on how to deal with supernatural phenomena. What did you think when you saw this, Gary? When you saw some of these guidelines? I mean, are they really coming out of the closet here, or what?
Well, those guidelines really, I think they were distributed back in 1974,
right,
and then again in 1978. But they were written in Latin. So I think when it came out in 2012, they've been translated into English. I think for the most part, the Catholic Church has been using those. They may not have been available to the public the way they're available now. But the Church has actually been following those rules. And it's an interesting time. I mean, who knows why they decided to come out with it now. Are they, in 2010, they started the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, decided to look into the whole Medjugorje apparition thing in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Mm-hmm. So it may be that they're prepping folks to talk about, that apparition, or whether or not they're going to back it or not going to back it. But I also think that there's just so much going on. Yourself, just in the last 10, 15 years, the way that people talk about the supernatural has changed significantly. And
sure.
And the internet is a big reason for that. So I think they wanted to come out and just, kind of give these basic guidelines for folks, because it's being talked about in so many different places.
And that's the amazing thing, right? The power of folklore and legend, the way oral traditions work, they still happen. It's just they travel a lot faster, like you said, because of the internet, because of really lame 24/7 news coverage where they're dying for a story, and someone says, "Hey, I see the Virgin Mary in a piece of toast." Well, you're going to get some ink or some time on screen for that. So you're right. I mean, a miracle can spread like wildfire to billions of people in hours. Now, what are some of these guidelines? I know they're really, when they say supernatural, they're mainly dealing with things like Marian apparitions, miracles, stuff along that nature. They're not talking about grabbing your EMF meter and trying to make contact. Although that's next. I'm sure that's Vatican 3 or 4. It's coming to a theater near you. But
Definitely.
what are some of these guidelines?
Actually.
What's that?
Vatican 2.5.
That's right, yeah. So what are some of the guidelines that they're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, it's really about apparitions and miracles. And essentially, what you take away from it is don't jump the gun. And I think anyone who works in the paranormal and the supernatural knows that, if you're really doing serious work there, you don't want to jump to conclusions. And that's essentially what the memo is about. The memo is about don't jump to conclusions, that things need to be investigated, and they need to be investigated, one, in a timely manner, but also in a professional manner. So I think it starts off with the bishop or a priest, whoever encounters this, or if something is brought to a priest or a bishop, they have to review it. And then if that priest or bishop feels like there's something to it, they will then send it on to the next stage, which, just moves up on the chain in the church hierarchy. They may bring in psychologists, they may bring in psychiatrists, they may bring in forensic specialists, they may bring in scientists. And so I mean, it's really about making sure that they want to investigate this stuff. So, because I mean, a lot of people, I don't say people are making things up, but there are opportunities where people may be mistaken, and
Sure.
The church doesn't want to look foolish, and the church wants to also, there's a tendency with miracles and stuff for people's eyes to be taken off what they should be focusing on, which for the church is always going to be Jesus, it's always going to be Christ, it's always going to be the Trinity. And so a miracle sometimes, like the Medjugorje apparitions, well, that almost builds a cult. People become very infatuated with the miracle. And it's kind of like Enter the Dragon. If you've ever seen Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee, he's teaching that kid in the beginning, and he's like, look, it's like a finger pointing away to the moon. And the guy's looking at the finger, the student. And so Bruce Lee smacks him in the head and says, don't focus on the finger, otherwise you miss all the heavenly glory. And that's essentially what that letter's about, which is miracles should always point to God. They should always point to Jesus. And if you're just focused on the miracle and the craziness of the miracle and the excitement of the miracle, then you may be being duped, or you may be missing the point.
Now, what's interesting is the guideline, the process you just talked about, sounds a lot like the same for exorcism, for when they're dealing with something demonic. Now, the Catholic Church has had that locked up for centuries, of course. Now, demons, if you watch paranormal television, like we do, we love that stuff. Demons are all the rage. Ghosts are boring. Ghosts are so 3 years ago. Everything's got to be a demon now. And the Catholic Church has had that similar process. You call the priest, who calls the diocese, who's got an investigator, on and on and on. They don't just say, all right, come on down Tuesday for an exorcism. I mean, it's a long, involved process. So this really is nothing new for the church, right? I mean, this bureaucracy and hierarchy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I don't think it's not a coincidence that, that report initially came out in 1974, which is 2 years after The Exorcist, right? The movie.
Right.
And, we were very young, we weren't even born at the time when that movie came out, but that was an international phenomenon that brought exorcism to a worldly consciousness. People who had never even heard of the word before, or even thought about evil incarnate, or the devil in that kind of way. Well, all of a sudden it just flooded everyone's consciousness. I mean, you say the word exorcism, automatically you go to the movie. And so it doesn't surprise me that in 1974 that they didn't come out with some kind of guidelines, that just outlined and it was really a reminder to priests, to bishops, to archbishops that this is the procedure you use. Because I'm sure a lot of people, started coming to the church, started going to their local priest and saying, I'm possessed, or I know of possession. And in some ways, I always wanted to write a book on how the 70s kind of went to hell. And it really started, I think it starts with Manson and that kind of, mass murderer, which led us into, and you could look at The Exorcist, and you could also look at the Amityville Horror a couple years later, which seems to blend the two of those. It seems to blend Manson and it seems to blend The Exorcist. And these things become, like you were talking about before, how folklore is so powerful, man. These become etched in people's consciousness. So I think the church, as much as it took them almost 400 years to apologize to Galileo when it came to science, sometimes they can jump on the ball on certain things. And I think, in 1974, they were probably reacting to some of these things.
Right. Okay, we've talked ghosts. After the news break, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about aliens, UFOs, time travel. It's going to get weirder and weirder. We'll be right back after the news. Just
Just in time for the 65th anniversary of the famous Roswell UFO incident, a former employee of the CIA has come forward with the claim that he saw proof that the 1947 crash in Roswell, New Mexico was in fact an extraterrestrial craft and not a weather balloon. The 35-year veteran of the agency, Chase Brandon, spent the last 10 years of his service as the CIA's first liaison to the entertainment and publications industries. It was in this capacity when he discovered stored material on the Roswell case. While doing research at the Historical Intelligence Collection, which is a vaulted section located at the agency's headquarters in Langley, Virginia, Brandon said he came across a box simply marked Roswell. Inside, he claims that he saw enough photographs and documentation to leave him with no doubt that the incident was real and that the initial claims of the witnesses were the truth. Exactly what the printed material and photographs revealed, Chase Brandon will not say. He feels that even as a former CIA agent, the secrecy agreement he signed all those years ago will always apply for good reason. Plus, he doesn't want to spend the rest of his retirement in the village known only as Number 6. In other news, a pair of so-called zombie graves have been recently unearthed in County Roscommon, Ireland. The archaeological dig, funded by the Royal Irish Academy, made the gruesome discovery at a historic site near Lough Key. The remains were of two men, one middle-aged and the other aged between 20 and 30 years. They had both been buried with a tennis ball-sized rock stuffed in their mouth. The chief archaeologist at the site, Chris Reed, said such graves are referred to as Deviant Burials, and that this was once a common practice in Ireland. Long ago, people believed in order to make sure that the body of an evil or possessed person could not rise from the grave, a stone should be shoved into the corpse's mouth, which would block the spirit from re-entering the body. I guess going through the nose would be too uncool for the evil spirit. Back to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for the news break. We're back with Gary Jansen, author of the book Holy Ghosts, or How a Not-So-Good Catholic Boy Became a Believer in Things That Go Bump in the Night. That is a long title, my good friend. Very long, but we love it. Okay, now we were talking about miracles and the supernatural. A miracle has taken place already on this show. You've gone the first half of the show, and not once have you tried to play with the Millennium Falcon, the Mystery Machine, and I believe an AT-AT, which is just a few feet behind you. That is a miracle.
Dude, the temptation, though, the temptation.
You are strong. You're strong in faith, I can tell. And the Force, clearly in the Force. Thank you, Eric, for throwing me that line. Okay, so let's get a little more weird here. Time travel is a subject that fascinates me to no end. And in the 1970s, 1972, Father Pellegrino Ernetti, here's a photo of him, there he is, was developing something he called a chronoviewer, a time viewer, with some heavy hitters in the science field, Enrico Fermi and Werner von Braun. And it was basically this cathode ray tube that they said could peer back in time. This is not as weird or sci-fi as it sounds, because we have cameras today that can see where cars were parked, that can see where events took place, not necessarily thousands of years ago, but hours ago. So this technology has been in the works for decades at the very least. So Father Ernetti claims that this chronoviewer was developed and could see into the past, anywhere he wanted. He could focus on people, and of course he picked Jesus and the crucifixion. Now, he said he saw all kinds of things, but only released one photo to the press. And here's the photo. On the left is the actual photo, which someone noticed pretty quickly that it was pretty darn close to the image on the right, which was a classical painting. So most people kind of cried foul. Now, it's important to know that Father Ernetti, to the best of my knowledge, was not working under the Pope or Rome in any way. It was kind of his own side project. But think of what happens when you've got a person of faith trying to validate that faith through technology and science. If I could take a picture of Jesus at the crucifixion, I could bring that back to present day and prove to the world this is all for real. Gary, have you looked into this case at all, Father Ernetti? Did you have any time to brush up on him?
Yeah, no, I think, I think it's a fact. I mean, thank you for introducing me to this, because you had mentioned this a few weeks ago, and I thought it was, we talked about a bit offline. It's just a fascinating example of faith, science, and really, I mean, this is how you make advances in science. I mean, whether or not this is a hoax or not, his thinking out of the box. I mean, we don't know what, just that tiny idea, which may seem a little out there, where that's going to lead. And I think, it made me think a lot of St. Ignatius, who was, your confirmation name.
Right, of course.
And but St. Ignatius had this he had this exercise. So he did the spiritual exercises, and you can read about the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius. But one of the things that he would do, which is in some ways a version of time travel, so Ignatius was doing this in the 17th century, is like he would take a piece of scripture, say it's the crucifixion of Jesus, and you would meditate on it, but you would place yourself in the scene. You would place yourself in the image. You would essentially travel back in time. And maybe you're the person who's standing there at the side of the cross, or you're someone inside the crowd. Maybe you're crying, maybe you're cheering, maybe you're throwing rocks at Roman soldiers. Whatever it is, you're taking yourself from where you are, and meditatively, you're transcending time and placing yourself in this event. The purpose is one, to engage in this historical, event in a spiritual kind of way. And a bit you're transcending time, and when it comes down to it, that's what the church is really all about, is to help us to understand that time as we know it, which is what science is, I think, trying to say, time as we know it is in some ways a bit of an illusion.
Sure.
When Jesus or God says, I am, they're not saying I was or I will be, it's present. And it's right now. And it's a combination of right now is a combination of past, present, future, and whatever.
Right.
So the chronovisor thing that he was getting at, I think really just kind of, I don't know, it was looking at a bigger spiritual truth. And I was, one thing I wanted to check into was whether or not he was a Jesuit, because the Jesuits follow the Ignatian spirituality. I was curious to see whether or not he had been influenced in that way.
We're going to jump to Matt. You get on Google and figure that out. No, I'm just kidding. We'll have to check on that. Matt, let's talk about UFOs and the Catholic Church. This is not a new proclamation. This has been going on a while too. Take us back, Matt, if you would.
Well, UFOs and the Catholic Church have had a love-hate relationship for a long time. And when you get reports that come from various places, usually people will get a sighting happen and they'll report to the authorities. A friend of mine, Francois, his father worked up in Montreal, and he would have a report of a UFO, and he would report it to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and they would work together, and that would then be forwarded on to various other individuals. Now, what's interesting in talking about Canada is the Shag Harbour incident. Mm-hmm. And in the Shag Harbour incident, a lot of it was, shall we say, commented on and helped been washed away by a particular priest, Father Gaffney, I believe is named, back in 1967,
right,
who actually was, his reports actually went into the RCMP files. So, yet his official position, when asked by press or what have you, was something completely different. And it was found that, after the Shag Harbour incident
what was the Shag Harbour incident?
Shag Harbour was a UFO that crashed in Nova Scotia in 1967.
Right.
And it was seen by a whole town. The town went out and tried to find the craft and stuff like that. It was seen moving down underneath the water and was said to come to rest outside of actually a SOSUS net listening station, which was run by the U.S. military, the Navy.
Front page news, right.
Yep. And the Royal Canadian Mounted Police mounted an investigation. There was all kinds of investigation, and one of the reports that helped quell it was from Father Gaffney. He basically played it down, but you'll find that his actual interest was found by Chris Stiles, who wrote the book Dark Object a number of years ago. And he was well known to be helping in debunk UFOs or help quell information about them being spread, although he collected all of the information about it and was said to have worked for the Vatican and helped trying to, stop the spread of this type of information.
Right, because it could be a potential problem for the church, right? I mean, if people are believing in UFOs, what does that do to what you've learned about the Bible? God created man. Well, if there's beings from other planets, what does that do? Gary, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think God definitely created man, but even before that, he created the heavens and the earth. So, it was a Catholic priest, George Lemaitre, who actually came up with the idea of the Big Bang, which is in many ways a very Catholic or very Christian idea, let's say Judeo-Christian, that out of nothing came something. Out of a void, boom, there was creation.
Right.
So I think the thinking now, and it could just be like earlier back in the 60s, people were just, the church was going through a period of transition, but I think the church's, position on it now is that if there were aliens, turned out to be alien life form, whether it's an ant somewhere on Mars, or if it turns out to be, ETs, in some outside galaxy, that this is all part of God's creation. God is the creator of heaven and earth, and before even before there was even creation, there was the I am. In the beginning was the Word. Right. And so that kind of all trumps anything that comes after it. So any kind of creation that's found doesn't exist outside of God. It's part of God's creation.
Now, in 2009, we've got the headline here as well. This is when the Vatican got together, a multi-day conference. There's the headline. They get together this conference of all kinds of scientists, not necessarily Catholics or even Christians, but astronomers. And I think it's very progressive, actually. The church wants to know, what do you think? Now, the gist of it was that they believed within 10 years or so, we're going to start to get some pretty compelling evidence that we're not alone in the universe. And Father Jose, we have a photo of him, Father Jose, the Vatican astronomer, basically puts this together and says, okay, we accept there might be life on other planets. What does it mean, Gary, when someone has this experience? How do you reconcile this incredible paranormal experience, like seeing a UFO, seeing an ET, seeing a ghost, and your Catholic faith? How do you bring that together?
Yeah, I think it comes back to the Bible. It comes back to Saint Ignatius. Saint Ignatius had this great. It was just one word, or not one word, but a phrase, which is seek God everywhere. Mm-hmm. So if there's a ghostly encounter, what does that mean? What does that mean about my relationship to God? It's to ask these questions. It's to engage in a dialogue with God. So if there's a UFO, then it's supposed to, if you have a UFO experience, it's actually supposed to be a reflection, a mirror of how great God is. That there is a multi-layered universe that we exist in. And a lot of times we can get caught up in just the mundane of life. And I think these things, it may happen in people's lives to help, inspire, to challenge, sometimes to scare, and maybe it's to scare for our own good. Right. But I think it's always supposed to make you turn to God. Any experience in life, whether it's paranormal or anything, is a mirror unto God. So it's a way of actually deepening. And my experiences that I had that I recount in Holy Ghost was actually all these paranormal experiences I had actually brought me closer to God. And I think the Vatican would say that if you have a UFO experience and it makes you closer to God, then it's a good thing. Right. If it took you away from God, if it makes you join a cult, if it makes you do something bad, then you're mistaken. Then there's something wrong with your thinking.
Right, understood. And the Vatican too. Again, a powerful government on our earth. 1.2 billion people, just about, and looking for answers. And it makes me wonder if the church is indeed getting its flock ready. That maybe they know a little bit more. Just as I would think that our U.S. government knows a little bit more, the British government, the Canadian government knows a little bit more than the rest of us. And by letting this stuff leak out in little bits, by the Vatican calling this council, maybe, just maybe, they're getting us all ready for some greater truth that's coming along, that when it does happen 3, 4, 5, 10 years from now, they can be saying, hey, we've been talking about this for years. Stay calm.
Yeah. And I think you're right on the money. I think you said it's there's a 1.2 million population. The government's that big. The thing to remember also is the Vatican City is actually the smallest country in the world.
That's right.
It's a country.
Nation.
It's a country, and it works with the UN. And I know the UN, I think it was in 2007, it brought together countries to talk about the UFO experience. And the Vatican, whether or not it was official or not, but I'm sure the Vatican was involved in that as well.
Gary, we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to the Vatican. Until next time, everyone, stay odd.
Thank you, everybody.